Let me show you how you can grow a camellia. Now, it's one of my favourite shrubs. It really gives something all year round, and it's a real plus in a garden. Now, the flower itself, there are many different colours. It's so beautiful, and it's not just the flower. Look at the foliage as well. It's evergreen, so you get this colour all year round. Lovely, lovely leaves, so glossy. It reflects the light, deep emerald green. So when it flowers, the flower really stands up against this emerald back foil. It's a beautiful plant. Grows in the garden, or you can grow it in a container. It's so easy. And there's a couple of types. First of all, there's the varieties that flower early on in winter, sasanqua. Now, they're beautiful. And then there are varieties that flower towards the end of winter and the beginning of spring. Now, that's japonica, hence from Japan, japonica, and also williamsii as well. But the special thing about camellias is they are the origins of tea. Now, Camellia sinensis, that's a variety that produces the greener, the Chinese tea, hence the term cup of cha. And also there's Assamica, and of course that produces the darker coloured tea, Assam. One of my favourites, I hasten to add. Who would have thought the personality of such a beautiful evergreen flowering shrub also has the essence in the British favourite drink? Now, you can make tea with japonica, but these cultivated varieties of camellia are particularly bred for their foliage, their stamina and their flower rather than their tasting quality. So they don't taste very nice. However, as a plant to give you colour all year round and then a burst of flower colour just when you need picking up during the winter months, it's a real winner. Now I'm going to show you how to make sure your camellia thrives after you've bought it from the garden centre. So keep watching as I'm going to pack in loads of hints and tips to make sure you get great success. Now, camellias prefer a more sheltered position. If you put them in exposed positions, the cold winter can cause them against damage, not just for the foliage and the life of the plant, but also for the buds as well. So a sheltered position is best when you're choosing them. They also are acidic plants, meaning they don't like too much lime. And a good indicator of whether your soil is suitable for a camellia is to see what else grows there. If you can grow rhododendrons or heathers or even azaleas, you can see that they're the similar type of acidic plant. But you can either take a soil sample to your local garden centre to have your soil tested, or you can buy these little testing kits that'll give you an idea what is your soil and whether it's suitable for growing camellias. Now, the best thing to do when you're planting is either plant during the springtime or late autumn so the plants can send out roots and get established. If you are, however, planting during the winter, which we're in the midst of at the moment, it's January here, I'm going to plant it in a container. Now I'm going to plant it in a container, which means I can move it into a more sheltered position during the winter months and then into a more prominent position in more open spaces during the summer. Ideally, I'd like it on my patio. I'm going to plant it into a container of this sort of size, so it's not too big compared to the plant. So I will have a choice in about a year or two's time whether I want to repot it into a bigger pot or then take the bigger plant that's growing in that pot and put it straight into the garden itself. It's best never to plant in exposed situations when you may get late frost when you bought the plant from the garden centre. And generally, when you go to the garden centre, you'll see that the camellias aren't merchandised outside with the normal plants on the plant beds. They're normally merchandised under the covered area to give them a bit of protection from the frost. And that is a good guide from anything you buy under those covered areas during the winter time. You know they need that little bit of extra protection. And if you are planting out into the ground and you do get a forecast of very cold weather, you can always give them a bit of cover with a little bit of fleecing or something similar to protect from that air frost. So I'm planting my one here into a container. I've got this lovely earthenware container here. How beautiful is that? And I've had it for years. There's been lots of different plants that have passed through this pot that are either planted in the grounds now or were seasonal bedding and have died off. I like this one because there's a good clear drainage hole at the bottom. It's that big. I don't need any crocks, and crocks are either stones or broken terracotta that stops the hole getting blocked up. Because that's the one thing about containers. They're great to grow, but you never want them waterlogged. So by having a decent drainage hole, If it's a very heavy rainy day, the water just goes out the bottom rather than filling up. And a really good tip is if you've got a very flat patio and you're worried there might be a seal between the base of the pot and the patio it's set, you can lift them up slightly. You can buy these things called pot feet, which you just put 3 underneath and sit them on top just to give a little bit of a gap for the drainage. Personally speaking, I use wine corks. Just save some of your wine corks and sit your containers on the wine corks, and that extra bit of gap ensures perfect drainage. So I've got a nice container here which is perfect to plant the Camellia. Now you could say, why aren't you planting it in a much bigger container? Well, my aim is I just want this Camellia for the patio this summer, and when it comes down to the autumn, I'll plant this out in the grounds over the far side, but I've not made the bed ready yet. So this is a really good step. It's growing whilst it's on the patio and I'm enjoying it. When the bed's ready, I'll plant it straight out. So container is ready. Next is the compost, and because, as I mentioned earlier, they're acidic plants which prefer not too much lime. What happens is the lime starts to inhibit the plant's ability to make chlorophyll. So the leaves go chlorotic, which is a yellowing if they're in a limey area. So if you've got a camellia at home, or a rhododendron, or a heather, or anything that's starting to look yellow, mottled yellow, could mean there's a lack of iron, really, because it's too limey. Now, if it's only happening a small amount to your plants, you can add in a little bit of sulfate of iron to give a bit of supplement to help the plant's health, or sequestrian of iron, which you can buy them in sachets that's soluble into a watering can, or you buy them in liquid and mix them as a liquid feed. So you can feed them with that, and it's worth feeding plants when they're in the container anyway and growing, especially when they're producing flowers, because they need that little bit more energy. Now the compost. I've got here Peat-Free Ericaceous compost. I always give the bag a bit of a bang onto the table like that, which enables it to stand upright so I can get my hand in and access the compost. Now, this has been specifically formulated with no lime in it and extra nutrients and minerals that are specific to plants that prefer slightly acidic soil. So the first thing I'm going to do is just to open the top. It's peat-free compost as well, so it's good for the planet. Right. What I try to do whenever I take compost out, sometimes the bags have been flattened as they've been on the pallets in the garden centre. I will crush out and make sure that the compost is a little bit freer. So it enables a bit of air to get in, and it stops that compaction. So I'm putting some of it at the pocket. Now, a good tip here is to work out that the plant itself must be planted more or less the same level as the soil in the container. You don't want to plant it too deep, you want to plant it at the same level, and that's whether you're putting it in a container or in the garden itself. So I'm going to give it a little squeeze at the bottom just to loosen the roots, and the pot should just easily fall off, and there's a nice root system there. So I'm going to measure it into position, a bit more compost at the bottom. Now I don't plant it so it's flush at the top with the top of the container. I go down a bit about that far, and I do that because it is a very hot sunny day and I do need to water. I can fill that top section up with water to slowly soak through and properly hydrate the plant during those dry spells. A bit more soil, make sure that's level, and position it in. It's always best to think that sometimes when you do the first water, the soil settles. So I'm just going a little higher there, that's fine. Now, I grab the compost and I make sure, as you can see here, it's a little finer. So it's just slipping down the sides. I don't want any air pockets around. And sometimes if you've got heavy lumps, the lump jams at the top and you've got a gap underneath, and that's just what you don't want. Take your time. There we are, just round like that. I position the plant perfectly central to the container itself. There's probably about that much of compost all the way around the outside and about that much of compost at the bottom, which over time the roots of this plant will fill and become too big for the container. What happens if you leave a plant in a container for too long? The roots itself more or less fill the container. The ability of the plant to be able to hold moisture in that container diminishes, and it becomes more difficult to take care of, and of course it starves whilst it's in it. So once the plant has grown too big, because it's a cylindrical container and it's got a big hole at the bottom, I'm going to be able to push this plant out. When it's slightly bigger, put it into a bigger container, or as I'm aiming to do here, providing that border's finished, put it into the new border over the other side. Now, the one thing when you are using peat-free compost with the containers is to make sure you feed on a regular basis. More food I'm giving this plant as a liquid fertiliser, as I'm doing the same with my hanging baskets, geraniums and fuchsias. I will be giving a specific Ericaceous feed to this plant to increase its performance, make sure its leaves look lush, green and healthy, and also to boost and charge the plant for more flowers. Now, the care of the Camellia once it's in a container, or even when you've got it planted in a border, it's quite easy because they're very low maintenance evergreens. You can prune them really to shape. Sometimes you get some branches that are leaning out away when they're very mature, that it's worth just trimming up so they keep well balanced, because otherwise with a particular large branch and then you get heavy snowfall, can cause a bit of damage. But other than that, pruning wise, they're really carefree. There's a few pests and disease, there's one or two as there is with all plants, but it's a pretty good all-rounder for a low maintenance plant for the garden itself. Now, the real secret is making sure during the summertime that it never dries out. If it dries out, it will recover itself, but sometimes you lose some of the bud formation from your flowers. So if you are growing them in containers, don't put them right by the side of the house so the eaves of the roof stop rain, and make sure that on very dry days, as you would do with all your containers, that they're well watered. One thing to remember if you're in a hard water area and you're using tap water to look after your camellia, it doesn't do it any favours. In fact, with all camellias, it's better to water with natural rainwater that you've harvested from a water bud. It means not only are you not putting hard water in there, but you're also not putting in things like chlorine and fluorides that are naturally in mains water. Rainwater works its best. They're pretty good for cuttings as well, both young cuttings and hardwood cuttings, so you can propagate from your own camellias. But it's a very good, robust plant to have. Beautiful flowers, elegant foliage, colour all year round, containers or in a border too. It's a real plus, a plant you can be proud of. Right, let's take this plant into its new home. Another new green friend in its new home, well, for this summer anyway. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for loads of great free content on gardening and nature. And don't forget, if you turn on your notifications, I'll give you a nod whenever a new video comes on. Enjoy your plants. Try a camellia.